So obviously we're sitting here in my library. And so occasionally I'll talk a little bit about what I read. Have I read everything in my library? Yeah, most of it. Not 100% of it. I own books that I haven't yet read, but I either have or will read everything here. So just a few books, and occasionally I'm just going to share books with you. I grabbed 4 of them today, 3 of them on a theme and 1 extra. So this has been my favorite book for most of my life. This series of books, it's part of 3. It's The White Mountains. The 3rd book is the Pool of Fire and The City of Gold and Lead. So those are the 3 by John Christopher. They're kids' books. First read this in elementary school, something like that, and it's about the Earth. Aliens have taken over the Earth, etc. Probably if I went and dug into it, it's probably has a lot to do with how I feel about the government. In reality, the aliens are kind of the government. I don't know. That would make me a conspiracy theorist, probably. But anyway, this was my favorite book as a kid. I've probably read it 6 times in my life, something like that. Quick read. Anyway, so there's one for you. I read a lot of history, and I read history in a couple of ways. One of the people I really respect, somebody I worked with, Dr. Pravaznik at the College of Business at Central Washington University. He and I spent a lot of time working together and talking together, and we read very differently. We're both readers, but we read very differently. And it was interesting because I read a lot more fiction than he does. And he asked me one time why I spend so much time reading fiction and how I get so much out of reading fiction. And it was an interesting thing because it caused me to think about it. I had never thought about it before. And a piece of it is I think we learn 2 different ways. Everybody knows that, not just I think that. We learn from being taught something. We learn something from a book, or we're taught by a teacher, and we learn from experience. We learn from going out and doing something. And I think more of us actually learn that way than actually learn through a book. And I think that continues on in our life. And I think fiction is very much that experience. That what fiction allows you to do is it allows you to experience a bit of life, a time period, a period of time through somebody else's eyes. So it could be a world that's never existed. It could be the past. It could be the future. It could be right now. But it's set through a different person's eyes. So you see their decision making, and you see their values, and you hear their values, and all those sorts of things. And I think we take something from that. We learn things not to do. We learn things that we do want to do, that we have heroes. As a soldier, I read a lot of books that were war-based books about heroes. Why? Well, because we were soldiers, and can I be the person that I need to be, or my country needs me to be, or whatever? And so you can read these stories that make you see the experience from somebody else's eyes. So we take something from that, I think. So I think it's just a different way of taking in information the same way. I think people don't realize that they learn as much from fiction as they actually do. They're just learning it a very different way. They're learning it through those experiences, and you're seeing an experience through a different set of eyes. And I think it can be very useful because you can see them through people you can't be, people who are older than you, or people who are younger than you, or people who are a different gender than you, or people who live in a greatly different time period than you, or people who have a perspective from another place in the world or another culture, all those sorts of things. It gives us opportunities to see the world in very different ways. So, and I think it's really powerful. History is a big thing to me. So I would like to think that the things I care about and who I am, politically and business-wise, and the things we talk about here, liberty, those, I believe, come from a greater sense of where we sit in history and the extraordinary place the United States is in comparison to everything that had come before it, and in comparison to the things that exist today in the world, of all the other choices. We live in a world where it's not by historical sense, it's very easy to get up and go someplace else in the world compared to any other time in history. You can get on an airplane, and at the end of the same day, you can be in a radically different country, and we would have the ability in many sense to pick a great number of countries. People right now with the presidential election are claiming, if Trump wins, I'm leaving the country and going someplace else. I go, grand, go. That's fine. I kind of wish some of you who want to change the country so much would just pick up and go to one you like better. Okay, if there's one out there that already meets your fancy, just go there rather than screw up the one we have. So where do I get my sense of history from? Well, I get them from a couple of places. I get it. This down here is actually my history section, and so I get it from books. And the history section that's down here, this is all nonfiction. This is nonfiction history. And so I get interested in sections in nonfiction history, and then I read lots and lots about it. What's my favorite nonfiction history book? It's Undaunted Courage. I'm sure I will talk about Lewis and Clark at some point in all the things we talk about. I get really interested in stuff. I mentioned this in a previous one of the vlogs, that I get interested in something and I dig in and I read and I read and I read and I read. And the Lewis and Clark was one I was like that. I read huge amounts of Lewis and Clark, and this one I like best. This book is widely considered the best, and it's also slightly controversial because Stephen Ambrose, who's not alive anymore, Stephen Ambrose wrote this book, and he made some questionable decisions in the process of completing this book, and I don't care. The book is good. The book is great. They didn't affect the quality of the work that's here. There's some questions about how he got to this place. But really good. And this book was written in the right time where history was becoming really, really popular. I'd have to look up exactly when this book was originally published. Looks like, of course, I'm not going to find it quickly because I should have thought of this. 1996 is when it was originally published. So that's about right, mid-90s. You start having things like the History Channel take off like crazy. You have National Geographic. You have this movement in the cable world to find out people are interested in documentaries and things like that. Well, at the same time, in the publishing world, you had academics who realized that they could do more than write textbooks. They could actually make it interesting. And if you made it interesting, and it's a follow-on, I mean, you've got some of the guys like Ken Burns who'd figured that out way before and had reached out to guys like Stephen Ambrose to be a part of those works. And so some of these writers who can write in a way that is very approachable that you'd really enjoy, you would like this book, I think. Yeah, it's the right time. It also, by the way, having read almost everything about Lewis and Clark, Lewis, one of the most controversial things about Lewis's life is his death. Did he kill himself, and if so, why? If you don't know that, Lewis, that's the controversy. Did he kill himself? If so, why? I believe he did, and I believe this book, I believe that the research that Ambrose did, from my own life experience and so forth, I buy what he said. So, the other way I do it is through fiction, and so I like historical fiction, and I'm going to share with you two of my favorites. Bernard Cornwell is my favorite author. He's only written a little bit of U.S.-based stuff. He's got a Civil War series that he's not done with. Bernard, if you're out there, we need some more of those. He's writing the Civil War from a Southern soldier's perspective. No, it's not about pro-slavery or it's about an actual soldier and the experience of going through the war. It just happens to be from that standpoint. This one is about the war between France and England that the U.S. got involved in. We call it the War of 1812. The War of 1812 was in the same time period, so it actually starts prior to 1800 and runs into the early 1800s. And Sharpe is a soldier, is an English soldier. He starts out as an enlisted soldier and becomes an officer, and that's a big deal. And I just really love this series. I've got the whole thing. If you fall in love with one of these books, by the way, if you want to start with one, Sharpe's Rifles is in the middle. I often start people with Sharpe's Rifles. I like this one, but because that's what I do is get somebody in and one that really grabs them and then send them back to the beginning of the series and have them read all the way through. But it's like over 20 books long. So if you like it, you get to read it for a long time. One other, this one, and I'm not going way out on a limb, that Cornwell's loved by lots of people, though you're either in the group of people who already know about it, but you can find people who will talk endlessly about Sharpe, for instance. This is another one. This is on the sailing side of things. Same war, by the way. So this is Patrick O'Brian, and the series is often called the Master and Commander series. That's why I picked the Master and Commander book. It also is not the first book in the series. Why do people gravitate to that one? Well, because there was a movie made, and the movie is Master and Commander. The movie is centered around this book, but doesn't stick just to this book. It's also a 20-book series, something like that. It's a big, long series. Very interesting. This one, Sharpe's, very easy read. Sharpe, sit down, you fly through it. If you like it, you'll just swallow it and it'll go far. This is the other end of the spectrum. This is maybe about as hard as it is to read of historical fiction. But to me, the interest is, there's an interesting thing about it. When I started reading the Master and Commander series, I have a relatively large vocabulary, larger than average vocabulary, most people would say. So it was unique to me to open a book and about 20 times a page, I didn't know what the words were. And so I was sitting there having to, with my dictionary or looking it up online, constantly look up the words, and it was a struggle. I'm like, wow, there's 20 books of this. This is gonna take a while. And at one point I actually Googled how to read Patrick O'Brian, because I'm like, is this what everybody's doing? How'd this guy get this popular? How can it be this popular if it's this hard to read? And I read a really interesting thing, and it was actually a guide on how to read Patrick O'Brian, and what it said was, don't look things up. Patrick O'Brian writes naval stories from 1800, and he writes them as though he's writing to people in the Navy in 1800. So he assumes this massive understanding of the vocabulary, of the language of sails and the language of ropes and all of the things involved with it. And it's just assumed. He doesn't explain it to you. It's just there. And so you can kill yourself looking everything up. But what was suggested was that you read it the way many people learn a foreign language. The immersive experience of a foreign language, where one of the things that people will do is go into a foreign country and just drop themselves in, and they don't look in, they just, maybe they go live with somebody and they just let it wash over them until they start to understand. And they do it, it's immersive. You get into it and your brain's just forced to comprehend it, or you'll get nothing. And over time you take it in. And it really worked for this. If you just let it wash over you, you just let the language go through you and read it it's almost like taking in music or I'd say poetry, but it's the one thing I don't read much of is poetry. So let's make it like music, that if you listen to music and let it wash over you, I think we've all had the experience of really liking a song, and then sometime 5 years into having it in your playlist, at some point you listen to the words, you're like, never heard that before. And sometimes it's like, wow, that's amazing. I've never actually heard it before. And sometimes you're like, I listen to lots of Beatles. I mean, tons of Beatles. Me and the Beatles channel on Sirius XM get along really, really good. And there are some songs in there where you go, my friend gave me a book that's about all the Beatles songs. It's about the writing of all the Beatles songs, and it's got the lyrics and all, and it's about all of those, and it's been an interesting read. And occasionally there are some where they just screwed with us. That's what they did. because there are times where you're going, what? Okay, well, this, just let it wash over you like a piece of music. And the amazing thing is in not too long, it started to just sink in. And it's cool to me. I'm not saying this is for everybody, but it's an amazing experience to me. I know way more about sailing ships in ways that, one of the things that really disappoints me is many of the things that were common image almost till 1900, basically all the way up until 1900, the end of the age of sail, things that could be seen all the time. You could have gone down to the wharfs in Seattle and watch a tall ship head out to sea and see things like all the guys run up into the trees, up into the mass and out to drop all the sails together and all of that. This was common stuff. This was stuff that if you lived around the water, you could see all of the time, that literally doesn't exist in the whole world today. Because we have things, even the people who still have tall ships. Okay, so the U.S. still has the USS Constitution, one of the old ships. You virtually never get a chance to see it under sail. They take it out under engine power and they motor it around. Why? Well, because there's rules now about things like putting 50 people up off the ground, or 150 or 200 people up off the ground without being attached to things and stuff like that. So the few sailing tall ships that go out now, even when they man the trees, they do it with minimum numbers, and they're on guide ropes, and they have their safety harness and their OSHA approved vest and all of that. Is not what it was. These were guys who were like barefoot guys, and yes, they were almost all guys, although there were girls, but they pretended to be guys because that was the only way they could get in. And they go rushing up into the trees, and I would love to see that. I would love to see the bare mast go from bare mast to fully rigged sail in the few moments with 150 people in the trees doing that. And there are photographs you can see of harbors like New York, where there were hundreds of tall ships out there at the same time. He's talking about the forest of masts, because there would just be masts as far as the eye can see in massive numbers. And things like that you never see today, a ship leave the dock under sail. Remember, they didn't have motors to turn on and turn it out and all of that. They had to actually catch the wind at the right way, and the amount of skill it took to bring a fully laden massive ship under nothing but wind power all the way up and safely against the dock. It's just knowledge that's gone. It just can't be done anymore. There are people who can do it with small boats, but I hear it's even impressive if you have a small sailing boat, to be somebody who brings your boat all the way into harbor and docks it under sail. I hear that that's like super advanced, and nobody does that sort of stuff. I could be proven wrong. I don't have a sailboat. But to see a giant ship do it would be mind-boggling to me, and it's completely lost. And it's something that I didn't know I missed until I started reading books like this. It talked about this whole life that doesn't exist anymore. So, things you can learn, the books, you can find things in life you care about that you didn't even know existed till you read them in books.